Hello, my name is Jasmine Harvell, and today I will be discussing the media landscape of Vietnam. For this presentation, I will be analyzing Vietnam's media system and examining how communication in the country has been shaped by its political institutions, cultural values, economic development, and rapid technological growth. Vietnam provides an interesting example because its media environment combines government involvement and communication with increasing participation in global digital networks. As media technologies continue evolving around the world, Vietnam demonstrates how countries adapt to new forms of communication while maintaining distinct approaches to media governance. According to the World Bank's research on digital Vietnam, the country has experienced remarkable economic and technological development over the past several decades, contributing to significant changes in how citizens access information and communicate with one another. Vietnam's growing digital infrastructure has expanded opportunities for media consumption and participation, making questions about communication access, regulation, and technological innovation increasingly important. These developments make Vietnam particularly valuable to study when discussing global media systems and communication trends. Throughout this presentation, I will examine the major components of Vietnam's media environment, including traditional media institutions, digital communication technologies, media ownership structures, and government regulation. I will also discuss how globalization has influenced Vietnamese media consumption and explore current issues affecting communication in the country today. More specifically, I will analyze how Vietnam balances technological innovation with government oversight as communication increasingly moves into digital spaces. Several course concepts will help analyze Vietnam's media system. These include the 4 theories of the press, which provides insight into the relationship between media institutions and political authority, the digital divide, which highlights inequalities in communication access, and McLuhan's concept of the global village, which illustrates how communication technologies connect societies across national borders. Rather than viewing Vietnam's media system as simply regulated or unrestricted, this presentation will demonstrate that it reflects an ongoing interaction between political priorities, technological change, and public participation in communication. By the end of this presentation, I hope to show that Vietnam's media system is best understood not through a single characteristic, but through the ways its history, culture, and technological development continue to shape communication in an increasingly interconnected world. Understanding Vietnam's media system requires examining the political, cultural, and economic contexts that shape communication throughout the country. Since the reunification that ended the Vietnam War in 1975, the country has operated under a one-party political system led by the Communist Party of Vietnam. Political institutions play a significant role in determining how information is produced, distributed, and regulated within Vietnamese society. Unlike media systems that prioritize private ownership and market competition, Vietnam's communication environment reflects broader national priorities regarding social stability, economic development, and government oversight. These political considerations continue to influence both traditional and digital forms of communication and provide important context for understanding Vietnam's media policies. Vietnam's economic transformation began with the implementation of the Doi Moi reforms in 1986, which introduced market-oriented economic policies while maintaining socialist political institutions. Since then, the country has experienced remarkable economic growth and increasing participation within the global economy. According to the World Bank, Vietnam's economy remains one of Southeast Asia's strongest performers, contributing to substantial investments in technological innovation and digital infrastructure. Economic development has consequently transformed communication practices throughout the country by expanding opportunities for internet access, digital media consumption, and global connectivity. These developments demonstrate the close relationship between economic modernization and communication systems. Cultural values also play an integral role in shaping Vietnam's media environment. Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory suggests that societies differ in how they prioritize individual and collective interests. Vietnam is generally characterized as a collectivist society that emphasizes social harmony, community relationships, and shared responsibilities. These cultural values help explain why communication practices may prioritize collective social goals differently than media systems found in more individualistic societies. Rather than existing independently from culture, media institutions reflect broader social expectations regarding public discourse. Finally, globalization continues to reshape Vietnam's communication landscape. Increasing internet access, technological development, and participation in global communication networks have introduced both opportunities and challenges for media governance. Vietnam demonstrates that countries can embrace globalization and digital innovation while maintaining distinctive approaches to communication policy and regulation. Examining these political, cultural, and economic influences provides an essential foundation for understanding how Vietnam's media system has been developed and continues to evolve within an increasingly interconnected world. Media systems do not develop independently from the societies in which they operate. Rather, they are shaped by political institutions, cultural values, economic priorities, and technological developments. Vietnam's media system provides a great example of this relationship because communication institutions continue to evolve alongside the country's broader social and economic transformation. According to Freedom House's 2024 analysis of Vietnam's digital environment, traditional media organizations primarily operate under government oversight and are expected to contribute to national development objectives, social stability, and public education. Therefore, understanding how Vietnam's media system functions requires examining both its institutional structures and the political priorities that influence communication practices throughout the country. Unlike many Western media systems that emphasize privately owned news organizations and market competition, Vietnam's traditional media institutions are affiliated with government bodies, political organizations, or state-approved social organizations. Newspapers, TV stations, and radio broadcasters consequently fulfill important political and social functions beyond simply providing information. Media institutions contribute to public education initiatives, communicate government policies, and promote broader national development goals. This organizational structure illustrates that communication systems often reflect the historical and political circumstances of the societies in which they operate rather than following a universal model of media governance. The four theories of the press provides a useful framework for analyzing Vietnam's media environment. Vietnam shares characteristics commonly associated with the authoritarian theory of the press because media organizations operate within regulatory frameworks that emphasize government oversight and social responsibility. Analytically applying this theory helps explain why media institutions prioritize national interests and social stability different than liberal media systems. However, Vietnam's communication environment also demonstrates that contemporary media systems frequently extend beyond traditional theoretical categories. Rapid technological innovation and increasing globalization have introduced new forms of communication that continue reshaping how information is performed and disseminated throughout Vietnamese society. Digital communication technologies have further transformed Vietnam's media landscape over the past 2 decades. Expanding internet access and widespread social media usage have created new opportunities for information sharing and global connectivity, while simultaneously presenting challenges regarding media governance and digital regulation. Vietnam's media system represents an ongoing interaction between traditional institutional structures and emerging communication technologies. Examining this relationship provides valuable insight into how countries adapt media policies and communication practices within an increasingly interconnected digital environment. Media ownership and regulation are essential factors for understanding how communication systems operate because they influence who is producing information, what information gets attention, and how audiences interpret news and events. In Vietnam, media organizations operate within a structure that is significantly different from many Western media systems. According to Freedom House's 2024 report on Vietnam's internet and media environment, the country's major media organizations are connected to government institutions, political organizations, or state-approved entities rather than being dominated by private companies competing within a commercial marketplace. The structure reflects Vietnam's broader political system and influences the goals and responsibilities assigned to media organizations. The Vietnamese government views media as an important institution for communication, education, and national development. Traditional media outlets, including newspapers, TV stations, and radio broadcasters, are expected to provide information that supports social stability and communicates important national priorities. As a result, media organizations do not operate solely according to market demands or audience preferences. Instead, they function within a framework where political and social objectives influence how information is produced and distributed. This demonstrates how media systems are closely connected to the political environments in which they exist. The four theories of the press provides a useful framework for analyzing Vietnam's media structure. Specifically, Vietnam shares characteristics associated with the authoritarian of the press because communication institutions operate under significant government influence and regulation. However, applying this concept requires recognizing that modern media environments can be very complex. Vietnam's media system continues to adapt to technological change, globalization, and increased public participation through digital platforms. Therefore, the country demonstrates how traditional theories of media governance continue evolving in response to new communication technologies. Agenda-setting theory can also help explain how Vietnam's media environment influences public awareness. This theory argues that media organizations influence which issues audiences consider important by determining which topics receive attention. Because Vietnamese media organizations operate within government regulatory frameworks, decisions regarding news priorities can reflect broader national goals. Similarly, framing theory helps explain how media organizations shape the interpretation of events by emphasizing certain perspectives, values, or narratives. For example, coverage of economic development, technological progress, and national achievements may be framed around themes of modernization and social advancement. Although government regulation remains a defining characteristic of Vietnam's media system, digital communication has introduced new complexities. Social media platforms have expanded opportunities for citizens to access and share information beyond traditional media institutions. This creates an ongoing relationship between established regulatory structures and emerging forms of communication. Overall, Vietnam's media system demonstrates how ownership, regulation, and political priorities influence the production and circulation of information within a rapidly changing digital environment. Although Vietnam's media environment has changed significantly due to digital technology and social media, traditional media still plays an important role in the country's communication system. Television, newspapers, and radio continue to influence how Vietnamese audiences receive information, understand national issues, and engage with cultural content. However, these traditional media sectors operate within a unique political and regulatory environment where government institutions maintain significant influence over media ownership, management, and journalistic practices. Television remains one of the most influential forms of traditional media in Vietnam because of its broad accessibility and ability to reach large audiences. National and regional television broadcasters provide news, education programming, entertainment, and cultural content while operating under government oversight. Television has historically played an important role in communicating national policies and promoting social values, demonstrating how media institutions can serve political and educational functions in addition to providing entertainment. This differs from many commercial media systems where audience demand and advertising revenue are often the primary factors shaping programming decisions. Newspapers and online news organizations also play an important role in Vietnam's media system. While Vietnam has a large number of newspapers and digital news publications, most operate under state regulation and are connected to government-approved organizations. As a result, newspapers often function not only as sources of information, but also as platforms for communicating government priorities, social campaigns, and national development goals. The structure demonstrates how ownership and regulation influence the purpose and role of media institutions within different societies. At the same time, Vietnam's traditional media environment has been transformed by globalization and digital communication. Vietnamese audiences increasingly consume international entertainment content, including films, television programs, music, and streaming services from around the world. Cultural imperialism provides a useful framework for examining these changes because it explores how powerful global media industries can influence local cultures and communication practices. However, Vietnam demonstrates that globalization does not simply replace local media with foreign content. Instead, international influences are often adapted to fit Vietnamese culture preferences and social values. McLuhan's concept of the global village also helps explain how Vietnam's traditional media has become increasingly connected to global communication networks. Advances in technology have allowed Vietnamese audiences to access international media like Korean dramas and Western films, for example, while domestic organizations continue to adapt their content for digital platforms. Generally, Vietnam's traditional media system demonstrates a balance between continuity and change. While television, newspapers, and radio remain influenced by established regulatory structures, they continue to evolve in response to globalization, digital competition, and changing audience behaviors. Vietnam's digital transformation has significantly reshaped the country's media system by changing the way citizens access information, communicate with others, and participate in public discussions. Over the past 2 decades, Vietnam has experienced rapid growth in internet usage, smartphone adoption, and digital services, making online communication an increasingly important part of everyday life. According to the International Telecommunication Union, Vietnam has developed a strong information and communication technology infrastructure compared with many countries at a similar level of economic development. These technological changes have expanded opportunities for communication while also introducing new challenges related to accessibility, regulation, and digital inequality. Social media platforms have become especially influential in Vietnam's communication environment. Platforms like Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and the Vietnamese messaging app Zalo have allowed individuals to share information, participate in online communities, and access content beyond traditional media institutions. This represents a major transformation because communication is no longer controlled exclusively through newspapers, televisions, and radio. Instead, digital platforms have created additional spaces where individuals can produce and distribute information. However, these opportunities exist within a regulatory environment where the government continues to monitor and regulate online communication. The digital divide can help in understanding the uneven impact of Vietnam's technological development. The digital divide refers not only to differences in internet access, but also to inequalities in affordability, digital skills, device availability, and the ability to effectively use technology. Although Vietnam has made significant progress in expanding connectivity, differences remain between urban and rural communities. Major cities such as Hanoi generally have stronger infrastructure and greater access to digital services, while rural and remote areas may face challenges related to connectivity and digital literacy. These differences demonstrate that technological advancement does not automatically guarantee equal participation in communication systems. Diffusion of innovations theory also helps explain Vietnam's digital transformation. This theory examines how new technologies spread throughout societies and why some groups adopt innovations a lot quicker than others. Younger generations and urban populations have adopted social media platforms and digital services quickly, while communities facing economic or infrastructure barriers may experience slower adoption. Vietnam's experience demonstrates that technological change depends not only on the availability of innovations, but also on social, economic, and cultural conditions. At the same time, Vietnam's digital expansion creates new questions regarding media governance. While digital platforms have increased opportunities for communication and global connectivity, they have also encouraged governments to develop new approaches to online regulation. Vietnam's cybersecurity policies demonstrate the challenge of balancing technological innovation with government oversight. Vietnam's digital media environment reflects both the opportunities and inequalities created by technological development, showing that access to communication technologies remains shaped by social, economic, and political factors. Vietnam's media landscape has been significantly shaped by globalization and the growth of international digital platforms. While traditional media institutions remain closely connected to domestic political structures, digital communication has allowed Vietnamese audiences to participate more directly in global information networks. Platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Netflix have changed how people access entertainment, news, and cultural content by creating communication channels that extend beyond national borders. As a result, Vietnam's media system is no longer shaped only by domestic institutions, but also by global technological and cultural trends. McLuhan's Global Village helps explain how digital communication has changed Vietnam's relationship with the rest of the world. As communication technologies become more accessible, geographic distance becomes less of a barrier to sharing information and cultural products. Vietnamese audiences can now engage with international media industries, follow global events in real time, and participate in online communities that connect people across different countries. However, Vietnam also shows that globalization does not create identical media environments everywhere. Local political structures, cultural traditions, and audience preferences continue to influence how global technologies are used. The influence of international media can also be examined through cultural imperialism. Global entertainment companies and digital platforms often have advantages because of their financial resources, technological infrastructure, and worldwide reach. These advantages can influence what content becomes popular and how audiences consume media. However, Vietnam shows that audiences are not simply passive receivers of more media. Vietnamese creators frequently adapt global formats and trends to reflect local culture, language, and social experiences. For example, content creators on platforms like TikTok may use internationally popular styles while incorporating Vietnamese humor, traditions, and everyday experiences. This process reflects globalization, where global media trends are modified to fit local contexts. The expansion of global digital platforms has also created economic opportunities within Vietnamese media environment. The growth of online creators, digital businesses, and influencer industries has allowed individuals and organizations to participate in new forms of media production. These developments demonstrate how globalization has expanded not only media consumption but also media creation. At the same time, increased global connectivity has created challenges for Vietnam's communication system. The rapid spread of information online has raised concerns about misinformation, online regulation, and government oversight. Vietnam's efforts to regulate digital platforms demonstrate the difficulty of balancing participation in global communication networks with maintaining national communication policies. Overall, globalization has transformed Vietnam's media system by increasing international connections while allowing local audiences and creators to maintain their own cultural identities. Vietnam's changing digital environment has created new challenges for how the government manages communication and information access. A recent example of this ongoing debate is Vietnam's regulation of Telegram, a messaging platform used by millions around the world. In 2025, Vietnamese authorities moved to restrict access to Telegram, citing concerns that the platform was being used for illegal activities, including fraud, misinformation, and the distribution of harmful content. This event represents a larger discussion about how governments respond to the growing influence of digital communication platforms. According to Reuters, Vietnamese authorities instructed telecommunications companies to restrict Telegram access after raising concerns about criminal activity occurring through the platform. When discussing the source, it is important to recognize that the government's reasoning focused primarily on cybersecurity and public safety rather than simply restricting communication. From the government's perspective, regulating digital platforms is a way to protect users and maintain a safer online environment. However, organizations that monitor media freedom have raised concerns that broad digital restriction may also affect access to information and online expression. This event connects closely to agenda setting and framing theories. The agenda setting theory suggests that institutions can influence public attention by determining which issues receive emphasis. In this case, Vietnamese officials emphasize cybersecurity risks and online crime as reasons for regulating Telegram. Framing theory further explains how the issue was presented to the public. By framing platform restrictions as a security measure, authorities shaped how audiences interpret the policy and its purpose. Vietnam's approach to Telegram also represents broader patterns within its media system. As discussed earlier, Vietnam maintains significant government involvement in communication regulation, and digital platforms have become a major area of focus. The four theories of the press, particularly the authoritarian theory of the press, helps explain why Vietnam places greater emphasis on state oversight and communication channels compared with countries that prioritize minimal government intervention. At the same time, this issue demonstrates the challenges created by globalization in digital communication. Platforms like Telegram operate internationally, meaning governments must balance national regulations with technologies that are designed to function across borders. Vietnam's restrictions on Telegram reveals a larger global debate over how countries should address misinformation, online safety, privacy, and freedom of expression in the digital age. Ultimately, the Telegram controversy shows that Vietnam's media system is continuing to evolve. As communication increasingly moves online, the country faces the challenge of encouraging technological development while maintaining the regulatory approach that has historically shaped its media environment. Vietnam's future communication environment will likely be shaped by the continued expansion of digital technology, increasing global connectivity, and ongoing debates over regulation. Over the past several decades, Vietnam has invested heavily in technological development and digital infrastructure, transforming how citizens communicate, access information, and participate in economic activities. As these trends continue, emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, digital platforms, and mobile communication services are expected to play a larger role in Vietnamese society. However, technological growth alone will not determine the future of Vietnam's media system. The country's communication landscape will also be influenced by questions surrounding accessibility, governance, and the balance between innovation and regulation. Diffusion of innovations theory helps explain how new communication technologies spread throughout Vietnamese society. Vietnam has demonstrated a strong ability to adopt digital technologies, particularly among younger generations and urban populations. Social media platforms, mobile applications, and online services have become increasingly integrated into daily life because they offer convenience and new opportunities for communication. However, adoption does not happen equally across all groups. Factors such as income, location, education, and digital skills influence whether individuals can fully participate in emerging communication systems. The digital divide will likely remain one of Vietnam's most significant communication challenges. Although internet access has expanded considerably, differences between the urban and rural communities continue to affect participation in the digital environment. According to the World Bank, continued investment in digital infrastructure and digital skills development will be necessary for Vietnam to ensure that technological progress benefits a broader portion of the population. Without addressing these inequalities, future communication technologies may continue benefiting groups that already have greater access to resources. Government regulation will also remain a defining issue in Vietnam's future media environment. As digital platforms become more influential, authorities will face increasing pressure to address misinformation, cybersecurity concerns, and harmful online content. At the same time, stronger regulation may raise concerns about access to information and online expression. Vietnam's experience reflects a broader goal challenge as governments attempt to create policies that protect users while allowing communication technologies to continue developing. In the end, Vietnam's future media system will be shaped by the interaction between technological innovation, social inequality, and government policy. The country's communication environment is likely to become more digitally connected, but the benefits of this transformation will depend on how effectively Vietnam addresses issues of accessibility and governance. Vietnam's future demonstrates that the development of communication systems is not only a technological process, but a social and a political one as well. Vietnam's media system demonstrates how communication environments are shaped by the interaction between political structures, cultural values, economic development, and technological change. Throughout this presentation, Vietnam has shown that media systems cannot be understood by only looking at technology or individual media organizations. Instead, they must be analyzed within the larger social context of the country. Vietnam's historical development, government structure, and focus on national development have all influenced how media institutions operate and how information is distributed. One of the most defining characteristics of Vietnam's media environment is the continued influence of the state over traditional communication institutions. Newspapers, television networks, and other major media organizations operate within a regulatory structure where government priorities play an important role in shaping communication. The four theories of the press, the authoritarian theory of the press particularly, helps explain why Vietnam's media system places greater emphasis on state involvement compared with more liberal media models. However, Vietnam's media environment is not static. The growth of digital platforms has introduced new forms of communication that continue to reshape how information is created, shared, and consumed. The rise of digital communication has created both opportunities and challenges. Increased internet access and social media participation have allowed Vietnamese audiences to connect with global information networks and participate in new forms of media production. At the same time, The digital divide demonstrates that technological development does not automatically benefit everyone equally. Differences in infrastructure, affordability, and digital literacy continue to influence who can fully participate in Vietnam's changing communication environment. Vietnam's relationship with global media also highlights the complexity of globalization. International platforms and cultural influences have become increasingly important, but Vietnamese audiences and creators continue adapting global trends to reflect local values and experiences. Concepts such as cultural imperialism and McLuhan's Global Village help explain how Vietnam participates in global communication networks while maintaining a distinct cultural identity. Ultimately, Vietnam's media system reflects a balance between continuity and change. Government regulation remains a central feature of communication governance, but digital innovation continues creating new opportunities for connection, creativity, and participation. The future of Vietnam's media environment will depend on how the country manages the relationship between technological advancement, public access to information, and existing approaches to media regulation. Vietnam illustrates that communication systems are not simply shaped by technology alone. They are shaped by the social and political environments in which those technologies develop.